Hi folks, this is Jason. Hope you're okay. We're looking at my second part in the historical reliability of the Gospels. As I've said before, the source for this is McGrew's lectures on the Gospels. These are notes that I've taken, and I'll also be interspersing it with my own notes, and I hope that you find it a blessing. At the end of the series, the lecture series, which I'll be doing over the next few weeks every now and again, I'm on holiday having a rest, and this is just something that I relaxing, and so I hope you find it a blessing. What we'll be looking at today is looking at history and how history confirms the Gospels. We're going to be looking at direct historical witness in terms of the broader narrative of the New Testament. Then we're going to be looking at the more minutiae, more unwitting historical evidence, unassumed detail within the New Testament and within the Gospels that show that the New Testament, and especially the Gospels, are historically reliable. So first of all, we're going to look at Tacitus and Josephus. These will give us the broad outline of the historical veracity of the Gospels. Tacitus writes in his annals, sorry, I always say annals, forgive me please, in his annals, in chapter 15 verse 44, he says, consequently, quote, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite torture on a class hated for their abominations, called Christians by the populace. Christus, for whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our pure creators, Pontius Pilatus, and a most mischievous superstition, thus checked for the moment, again broke out not only in Judea, the first source of evil, but even in Rome. An arrest was first made of all pleaded guilty, then upon their information a vast multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city as of hatred against mankind. Now we learn a number of facts from what Tacitus as the Gospels and the New Testament. First of all, that there's a group of people called Christians, people who identified with Christ. Secondly, there is a person called Christus. Thirdly, this person was executed under Pontius Pilate in the time of Tiberius. Next, the Romans saw this new faith as superstitious. That also there was anger and hatred towards these people, the Christians. That this group of people came from Judea and spread to Rome. And by AD 64, there was quite a number of these people in Rome. Information that we get from this passage of Tacitus, which bears witness to the four Gospels and to the New Testament. Now, it's important that we just tackle a couple of issues here. On the internet, there is a massive movement out there on the internet by internet skeptics that will attack Tacitus left, right, and center, and they will tell you that it's a forgery, that it's not authentic, and this is just absolute humongous lie. And if you went to investigate it yourself, you would be shocked at how these skeptics really are being dishonest about this. The other issue is the word Christos. The Latin Christos, the Latin misspelling of Christos. Skeptics will say, well, this is a big shows that Tacitus is not authentic. most scholars would agree that the misspelling is actually shows authenticity of the actual original word. And so, for example, if you read the article Krestos for Christos by Helga Bortemann, Stuttgart, France, 2295, you get a very scholarly resume of thinking on the scholarship here. Also, Text and Transmissions, a survey of Latin classics, Oxford Clarion Press, 1983, page 40611. That's just to hit on the nail any of the skeptics might throw questions on Tacitus. You need to get away from what the skeptics are saying. They are very, very poorly scholarly equipped to deal with these issues, even the richer carriers of this world. So move away from them and do some decent scholarship and read some decent articles on the subject. Then the next writer is the Josephus, Jewish historian, first century, 837, from the area of Galilee, and wrote a work, and this is an important piece of literature on the testimony of who Jesus is. And he writes, "Now there was about this time Jesus a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was Christ. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again at the third day, as the divine prophets have foretold these, and 10,000 under wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians, so named from him, are not extinct at this day." Now there is a lot of attack on Josephus. A lot of the skeptics' websites will do everything they can in the ancient passage. What has to be noted, and here's the note: in every manuscript that we have on Josephus, this passage is there. Okay? So let's read the Arabic translation, which is an ancient translation. "At this time there was a wise man who was called Jesus, and his conduct was good, and he was known to be virtuous, and many people from among the Jews and the other nations became his disciples. Pilate condemned him to be crucified and die, and those who had become his disciples did not abandon their loyalty to him. They reported that he appeared to them 3 days after his crucifixion, and that he was alive. Accordingly, they believed that he was the Messiah, concerning whom the prophets have recounted wonders." Jesus in Non-Christian Source, in the book Bruce Chilton and Craig A. Evans edition, Studying the Historical Jesus, Evaluating the State of Current Research, in Leiden and Brill, 1998, page 466 to 67. Dr. Craig Evans, who I've mentioned today in another video, says this: the passage has aroused a great deal of interest among scholars, and then he says, "Most today regard the passage as authentic but edited." Now, if you want to go into more scholarship, have a look at Vermeers, who has recently died, and he's the sort of expert in absolute massive expert in Dead Sea Scrolls. He's also done some written some information about what he thinks concerning Josephus in this passage. A summary of the scholarship in this area, and just to give you another nuanced view, who not an evangelical but a Jew who was a Catholic but turned Jew. So Craig Evans is an evangelical scholar, but a very eminent scholar who people respect on both sides of the spectrum, whether it be skeptical or orthodox. So I'm just giving you other sources that actually back up Evans, who are a different theological perspective. But we really have to call out Dan Barker in his book Godless, Berkeley, Ulysses Press, 208, page 255. Now, this atheist is typical of many of the atheists on the World Wide Web today, who are not only bad, actually atrocious, and pumping out 100% unadulterated lies. And they need to be called out on a scholarly basis. Dan Barker, this atheist, writes, the paragraph is absent from early copies of the works of Josephus. For example, it does not appear in Origen's 2nd century version of Josephus, in Origen's Contra Celsum, where Origen fiercely defended Christianity against the heretical views of Celsus. Origen quoted freely from Josephus to prove his point, but he never once used this paragraph, which would have been the ultimate ace up his sleeve. This is just absolutely gross butchering. It has to be described, as far as I'm concerned, as butchering historical research. I would absolutely doesn't know what he's talking about. The manuscript evidence is overwhelmingly for the reading of the Testimonium as we have it. When he's going on about Origen and the quotations of Josephus, it's not the whole of Josephus. It's not the whole text of Josephus. So to say that we have the earliest manuscripts that don't have the Testimonium in them is just ridiculous. Absolutely, totally ridiculous. Now this scholar goes on to make even more damaging comments, which damages himself and the atheist community, because the atheist community take up this kind of scholarship and pump it out on the World Wide Webs, not realizing that it's absolutely a joke, and it really is a joke. Here's some of the stupidity in his book, page 25556. Many are convinced that the entire paragraph is a forgery. Many scholars believe that Eusebius was the forger and interpolator of the passage on Jesus. That is just an outrageous lie. Page 256, Christianity did not get off the ground until the 2nd century. Page 256, that is another absolute lie. That's not true at all. We have references of Christianity spreading right across the Roman Empire from Pliny the Younger's letter, which just completely shows us that even around about 80 AD, there were people all over the place worshipping Jesus as God. So, I mean, this guy does not know his historical sources. And then we go on to page 258 by Dan Barker. Even Christian scholars, Antiquities 2911, about the death of James, the brother of Jesus, to be adopted text. I do not think so. Most scholars recognize the James text that Josephus mentions is authentic. So basically, to put it in a nutshell, the atheist scholarship on Josephus is basically utterly atrocious, and they are truly pumping out lies, and you're being hoodwinked as atheists and skeptics by the crass scholarship of Dan Barker and many of these atheists. It really is atrocious. I have to say it again. It's absolutely atrocious that these atheist scholars like Dan Barker pump this stuff out, and nobody in their right mind who has any in historical Jesus studies, no one in their right mind would say the kind of things that Dan Barker has said in his book. And that atheists would read these books and take them on board is, to my mind, showing a lack of critical thinking. Now, what we've been looking at is the broad strokes of Christianity being verified in these historical sources concerning the New Testament and the Gospels. We could go on and the other thing, that the more incidental information, if we look at the way the first century Palestine was conducted, both in its taxation methods, both in its judicial methods, both in its military makeup, if we look at that, if we look at the development, the political development of 6 BC right up to AD 44, and we look at the ruling elite, we look at the various substrata of leaders, the ethnarchs and the tetrarchs, we look at the various principalities within the Roman province, etc., etc. If we look at all these broad bits of information, we find that the Gospels have points of contact. We see that in the Gospels and Josephus there is a connection there with John the Baptist, as we see in Matthew and Mark. We see in the book of Acts various kings and leaders of the time are mentioned, which are correct. The coming of Mary and Joseph from Egypt matches the kind of things that were happening at that time in Matthew. We see the use of money like the denarius in Matthew and Luke, and we see the archaeology of the period of Nazareth, of Capernaum, and so we could go on and on in the details. What we'll do is we'll just look at John the Baptist. We can't look at all the information. But if you look at Matthew chapter 14 verse 1 to 12 and Mark 6 14 29, we have here Herod of Antipas, who comes to kill John the Baptist. We see that in those passages there is a strong indication of why Herod killed John the Baptist. It was because of John the Baptist's attack on the marriage situation of wanting to marry his brother. We have incidental information, such as in Mark 6:27, Herod Antipas sent an officer to execute John the Baptist, and it's interesting that that was not a civil worker of the state. In Josephus' Antiquities, in chapter 18, verse 5 and 1, we see that Herod was at war at that time with Aretas IV, king of the Nabateans, and explains why Herod would use military against John the Baptist. So we could go on. If you look at the coinage, the denarius which is mentioned in the Gospels. We found coins that match the description that we find in the Gospels. Titles of leaders such as Augustus Tiberius Caesar, son of the divine Augustus. We find inscriptions that match exactly the way the Gospels are actually talking about these individuals. We can go on about the archaeological evidence that verifies the Gospels. For example, in John 5:2 we have the description of the pool of Bethesda, and we found the archaeological evidence for this. Alfred Loynes in 1903, page 386, says, Las ansias quae croient trover dans la source un symbole dus Judaism at dans la kink, and go on. In English it says, the ancients who hoped to find the source of Jewish symbol and in the 5 porches an allusion to the 5 books of the law undoubtedly discovered the thought of the evangelist. And so Robert M. Price on Synagogue and Pharisees in Capernaum, The Incredible Shrinking Son of Man, 2003, page 14. No friend to collision between the gospel tradition and archaeology concerns the existence of synagogues and Pharisees in the pre-70 AD. Galilee. Historical logic implies that there would not have been any, since Pharisees fled to Galilee only after the fall of Jerusalem. Sure enough, there is virtually no archaeological evidence for synagogue buildings in Galilee in Jesus' day, and this is a major blow to gospel historicity, since Jesus is depicted as constantly entering synagogues and meeting halls. So if we look at Luke chapter 7, verse 1 and 5, we see, after Jesus had finished all his sayings in the hearing of the... Now a centurion had a servant who was sick, and at the point of death he was highly valued by him. When the centurion heard about Jesus, he sent to him elders of the Jews, asking him to come and heal his servant. And when they came to Jesus, they pleaded with him, earnestly saying, he is worthy to have you do this for him, for he loves our nation, and he is the one who built us our synagogue. All right. So who's correct here? The Gospel of Luke or Robert M. Price, an agnostic scholar that the atheists use? Note this, Frank Findler says, Capernaum, like Nazareth, is unknown outside the Gospels before the end of the 1st century. Excavation at Capernaum. The 1st century Capernaum synagogue in which Jesus preached has probably been found because more than one synagogue time. We cannot be sure that this new find was Jesus' synagogue, but this recently discovered 1st century building is certainly a likely candidate. The conclusion that this was a 1st century AD synagogue seems inescapable. James F. Strange, Herschel Shank Synagogue where Jesus preached, found at Capernaum, Biblical Archaeological Review, 1983. So George Rawlinson, on the historical evidence of the truth of Scripture, records stated Boston, Gould, and Lincoln, 1860, page 2045, says, it is evident that the entire historical framework in which the gospel picture is set is real, that the facts of civil history, small and great, are true, and the personages correctly depicted. To suppose that there is this minute historical accuracy in and that the story itself is mythic is absurd. Unless we will declare the apostles and their companions to have sought to palm upon mankind a tale which they knew to be false, and to have aimed at obtaining credit for their fiction by elaborate attention to these minutiae, For such an avowal, even rationalism itself would shrink, but the only alternative is to accept the entire history as authentic, as what the Church has always believed to be true, to be the truth. So I'm going to give you some recommendation of books that McGrew gives, and he recommends J.F. Strange, Herschel Shank, Synagogues Where Jesus Preached, Found at Capernaum, Biblical Archaeological Review, 1983, requires creation of a free account. And he also encourages to read the online essay by C.S. Lewis, Modern Theology and Biblical Criticism, which is a brilliant expose. Free books that you can read are William Binnington, B-I-N-I-N-G-T-O-N, Boyce, William Binnington Boyce, Higher Criticism and the Bible, London, 1881, chapter 17, Skeptical Attacks on the Gospels, page 331 to 35. F.F. Bruce, The New Testament Documents, are a great classic. Septimus Buzz, Roman Law and History in the New Testament, London, Rivington's, 1901, a longer study full of interesting and valuable information. William Paley, A View of the Evidences of Christianity, 1859, page 37. McGrew says it's a classic statement and well to be read. And then recent books, Paul Barnett, Behind the Scenes of the New Testament, 1990. He's a good writer. Paul Barnett again. Is the New Testament Reliable? 2003. E.M. Blakelock, The Century of the New Testament, 1962. E.M. Blakelock, The Archaeology of the New Testament, 1970. E.M. Blakelock, The Compact Handbook of the New Testament Life. Craig Evans, Jesus and His World, 2012. Cole Hemmer, The Book of Acts in the Setting of Hellenistic History, 1989. Craig Keener, The Historical Jesus of the Gospels, 2009. McGrew says, a massive and meticulous scholarly work by one of the leading New Testament scholars of our time. Also, have a read of Craig Keener on the Book of Acts. A.N. Sherwin White, Roman Society and Roman Law in the New Testament, 1965, Oxford professor. So very important there. Dr. Peter Williams is a lecture video that you can listen to called New Evidences the Gospels Were Based on. You go and listen to that. It's quite heavy going. I would only listen to it if you want to develop a scholarly as an apologist, because it's very detailed information and very technical information. It's a public lecture, but I would only listen to it if you really want to get to grips with some cutting-edge scholarship on why the Gospels are historically reliable. And then also Timothy McGrew, The Gospels and Acts as History, is also another good piece of source information. I would also encourage you to read Josephus' history of Jewish Antiquities, Flavius Josephus. You know, if you get a chance, have a read of that book. It's a big book and it's very good, and you'll see a lot of information. Also, if you go to Historical Apologetics, you will find, if you type in Historical Apologetics, you'll find some really helpful books on the Gospels there, where it shows historical reliability and how it relates to Josephus. If you go to bible.org and type in Josephus and the Gospels, you'll get a good resume of an article where you can look at Josephus and the Gospels in much more detail. Also, Bloomberg has also written a book on the historicity of the Gospel of John, which is an excellent book as well. So these are some of the sources that you can go and look at and develop and grow today. I hope this has been a blessing to you. I hope it's encouraged you. There was a lot more material in McGrew's lecture here that I've left out, and the stuff that I've put in myself and filled in the blanks, and also given my own opinions on stuff. So I just hope that this has been an encouragement to you, and God bless you, and see you around. I'm going to do another talk now, and so I'm just going to get a cup of tea, and then I'm going to be back in a mo, and I'm going to do another talk on the historical reliability of the gospel. So what we've done here today is we've looked at some external evidences for the historical reliability of the Gospels. What we've done is we've took two famous passages and we've looked at some of the historical information there. I've unpacked, I've just given you some clues about certain things. I think that just to point out that skeptics will say, well, the word Christian wasn't used till such a later date. Well, if you read the book of Acts, that's not true. There's a very clear, it's very, very clear that there is a movement that's moving away from Orthodox Judaism, and it was named and shamed by its opponents, by the Pharisees, etc. So, you know, these skeptics coming up with these silly arguments are just silly. The point is this, is that when you read the cultural literature of the first century about the way society was and the culture of that time, it's replies by skeptics where they will say things like, for example, they will say, well, you know, the Gospels differ on some issues compared to Josephus. Like when Josephus is talking about John the Baptist, it's from a different slant than actually the Gospels, etc. So you'll get skeptics coming back and saying that. But they don't really understand the nature of history. History is piecing together bits of information, and sometimes diverse information on a historical situation can give you a broader picture and a broader balanced understanding. So, for example, Josephus diverges beautifully, interconnects with the Gospels beautifully, and also when you bring just to get a rounded picture of John the Baptist, you also get a rounded picture of Herod of the time. So that's a counter to these kind of atheist skeptics arguments to say that, for example, when you're using Josephus to verify the historical veracity of the New Testament and the Gospels, that actually you're not being honest, because there are differences between Josephus and the Gospels. And my repertoire against that is, if you do a detailed analysis of Josephus and compare it with the Gospels, you can get that detailed analysis on bible.org. Type in Josephus and the Gospels, bible.org, and you'll get a detailed analysis of Josephus and the Gospels. What you find in that detailed analysis is a remarkable linking together and verifying of each other of historical information about Herod and John the Baptist and the times. But also there are differences, but these differences are not contradictions. They actually complement each other, and you'll find that out for yourself. So I hope this has been an encouragement to you. I hope it's been a help to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed talking about it, and I really appreciate the work that Dr. McGrew has done. and I hope that you valued my own thoughts on top of what he said, recommendations and reflections. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the evening. I'm going to get a drink now, and I'm going to come back and finish my last talk tonight. As I've said, I'm on holiday, and this is just me relaxing and just enjoying doing something that I enjoy, which is to talk about these scholarly things. And I hope you're all well, and God bless you. Forgive me if I'm not interacting with you. It's because I'm on holiday. God bless you.